Why do you think humans think negatively about chaos? Because clearly that's something that we're going to have to deal with if we're going to turn it into opportunity. Why are humans seemingly wired to avoid chaos, disruption, change at all costs?
I imagine it has something to do with evolution. I'm no biologist, but imagine, that time in human history when we came down from the trees and had to face all those enemies that we had. And that's where we got our fight or flight instinct. You contrast us with, say, spiders, which in some ways are superior beings to us humans. Um, if you ever have your house inspected for its energy efficiency, one of the first things the inspectors will look for is cobwebs. And the reason for that is spiders set up their webs where the atmosphere is chaotic, where there are drafts, because that's where insects fly by confused. And at the same time, you look on the other hand at dragonflies, which are biologists will tell you are the world's most successful predator. They have a predation success rate every time they try to attack their prey of more than 90%, as contrasted to, say, lions, which have a success rate under 20%. What do dragonflies do? They're able to stay in the middle of things no matter how chaotic they are because they have this amazing hovering ability. And I hope we can get to this a little bit later. They are able to predict the future, which is also very important in how you deal with chaos. So if you look at two very successful kinds of creatures, they're the most successful at dealing with chaos. And so I know we will be talking about chaos. I've got a lot of stuff to say about the business opportunities arising from it, not just insects.
For sure. That was the most random but fascinating. So my background, you may not know this, regular listeners will. My background's in chemistry, science. I actually host a science podcast called Excited Science. And so I love all these anecdotes, especially when we can kind of tie nature into what we're doing day to day. Because, and we won't dive into this topic because it might be a conversation for another 3 hours, 5 whiskeys conversation further down the line. But I'm convinced a lot of what we do, we add extra human complexity onto the top of it when we don't need to. If we followed more like principles of business, of selling, of living, we'd probably be happier human beings on the back of it. Right. Okay. So let's get into chaos specifically then, less for insects and animals and more for humans. Why is it, and I'm, for the audience and yourself, Jay, I'm trying not to ask a lazy question here, but I want to keep it massively open-ended because I want to see where you go with it because I'm intrigued. Why does chaos lead to potential opportunity for business people, salespeople, and I guess capitalism as well?
I'm working on my next book, which is about the art of opportunity. And I am a rhetorician. I try to apply the principles of rhetoric, the ancient art of persuasion. And one of the key principles of rhetoric is something called kairos. And we can get back to that if you're interested. But kairos has to do with timing and seizing the moment, seizing an opportunity. So I was researching this book, going through a whole lot of science, business history, behavioral economics, and the like. And I expected that the greatest opportunities arose from technology, either directly or indirectly. And I actually found that, especially when studying business history and talking to economists, I found that people tend to become fabulously wealthy and found new businesses. Economies, in fact, grow the fastest during or immediately after the most chaotic times. So, in other words, chaos has to do, you have to think about what chaos is exactly. And here I'm going to get super nerdy on you because I'm a word guy. That's what I do for a living. Chaos, the word comes from the Greek chaos, which comes from a word that means gap. So chaos isn't just confusion, it's an opening at the same time. This is the original meaning of the word. And so chaos has to do, when you think about what chaos is in terms of politics, as both our countries are going through today, and what happens with economies when they get chaotic. the rules change, or they go away, or they don't apply, or people don't follow them. And so chaos is a kind of wild west, and where there are no fences. And that's where the people who can deal with the chaos and the confusion, simplify the facts around them, and actually act while other people are frightened. Those are the people who tend to be the greatest opportunists.
I love it. Perhaps we can touch on first principles or something like that later on in the show to kind of tie this together and make it practical. But I think this is fascinating. Have we misconstrued what chaos is then? If we frame it up as it's a gap in our knowledge, or it's a gap in from one thing starting to one thing finishing to another thing starting. It's natural. It's in nature. It happens in the universe as a whole. Clearly, if we talk about entropy and things like that, chaos is important. We wouldn't be here without it. Have we just misaligned? I say we. Maybe I'm talking about myself. Maybe other people aren't so bothered about chaos, but have perhaps I misaligned what chaos means, and we should see it as opportunity as opposed to see it as a potential for things to be taken from us?
Well, I think so. And let me get back to rhetoric. Everything goes back to rhetoric as far as I'm concerned. And so rhetoric was invented by these ancient educators and consultants who, in a nice bit of branding, called themselves sophists, meaning the wise ones. And so, one of the things that sophists taught was that there's a time to persuade and a time not to persuade. And any salesperson knows this, obviously. Holding your fire can be the best thing you do. You know to make a cold call at a particular time and when not to. But even more than that, the sophists believed that there is a certain set of skills and principles that can be applied that's the equivalent to shooting an arrow, that's what they had back then, through a chink in the armor, through an opening. That gets us back to chaos. So chaos can be terrible, but one of the things the sophists taught was how to reframe every occasion. Can I tell you just a quick story about this? Because I think it just sums up what the sophists were thinking. Back in the day, many years ago, I was an administrator and I taught at Dartmouth College, an Ivy League university here in America. And I had a student intern named Emily Hill, who did a year abroad in China as a student. While she was there, she was on a bus tour going through the Chinese Himalayas, and the bus got caught in a blizzard and it stuck. And so she was the only person on the bus who spoke Mandarin, and she led the entire group to safety. 2 weeks later, she decided to take a little break and be a tourist in Nepal, where she was gored by a rhinoceros in the Nepal's Royal Chitwan National Park, or Royal Park. So when she got back, I said to her, don't tell me about what happened to you, because it was all over the news in the United States. Tell me how people responded to it, because this has to do with how you reframe moments of chaos. She said, it's funny you asked that, because she was from Kansas City, Midwest, very conservative area. And she said all her parents' friends said, you see what happens when you let her out of the country? And she said all her fellow students at Dartmouth, all these type A students, said, wow, I wish I had an experience like that. And if you look at the two responses to this, one was flight and the other was not fight exactly, but aiming for the gap in that, like the gap in opportunity that they had. And to this day, I imagine she can get any drink she wants in a bar telling that story. That's what the sophists were talking about. How you frame a situation. When something's chaotic, it can seem awful. War, the political turmoil in this country, the pandemic, all that sort of thing. We can simply say, you see what happens when we step outside our house. On the other hand, some people are going to be absolutely richer than God coming out of this pandemic and all the confusion.